standing in my grandfather's empty house, holding a legal document that would destroy my mother's lies forever. I realized she had made one fatal mistake. For months, Mom told everyone I did not deserve a penny of Grandpa's inheritance because I was ungrateful and distant. She convinced my aunt's cousins and even my own brother that I had abandoned the family. But what she did not know was that Grandpa had secretly updated his will just weeks before his death, and I had the only copy. Everything she built her case on was about to crumble. Before we dive into this family betrayal that tore apart everything I thought I knew about blood loyalty, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, smash that like button if family drama gets your heart racing, and subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you will want to see how this revenge unfolds and how karma finally caught up with the person I once called Mom. The whole nightmare started 3 months after Grandpa's funeral when Mom called a family meeting at her house. I remember walking into her pristine living room, seeing all my relatives gathered around the mahogany coffee table like a tribunal. My brother Jake sat stiffly beside our cousin Rachel, while Aunt Margaret and Uncle Robert occupied the couch with expressions I could not quite read. "Madison, we need to discuss your grandfather's estate." Mom began, her voice carrying that authoritative tone she used when she wanted to sound official. She pulled out a manila folder thick with documents and spread them across the table like she was dealing cards. "As you know, Dad left specific instructions about how his assets should be distributed." I nodded, expecting to hear about the family farm, the antique collection, maybe some savings accounts. Grandpa had always been private about money, but everyone knew he had worked hard his entire life and saved every penny he could. Mom cleared her throat and lifted a document from the pile. "According to his will, the majority of his estate goes to establishing a scholarship fund in his name. The remaining assets will be divided among family members who demonstrated loyalty and commitment during his final years." The way she emphasized loyalty and commitment made my stomach drop. I knew exactly where this was heading. "Unfortunately, Madison," she continued, not even looking at me directly, "your name does not appear anywhere in the distribution list. Dad felt that your absence during his illness showed a lack of family values." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of Mom's grandfather clock. I felt every pair of eyes on me, judging, measuring my reaction. Jake shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Rachel examined her fingernails like they held the secrets of the universe. "That cannot be right," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I visited Grandpa every week until the nursing home restricted visitors because of COVID. I called him every day during lockdown." Mom shook her head with what looked like genuine sympathy, but I caught something else in her expression. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. "I understand this is difficult to accept, honey. But Dad was very clear about his feelings. He told me personally that he was disappointed in how you prioritized your career over family." That hit like a physical blow. I had worked 60-hour weeks as a legal assistant to save money for law school, dreaming of making Grandpa proud. He used to tell everyone about his granddaughter who was going to be a lawyer someday. "Where exactly did this conversation happen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "When did Grandpa supposedly tell you he was disappointed in me?" Mom's hesitation was barely perceptible, but I caught it. "During one of our weekly visits at Sunset Manor. He was having one of his clearer days and wanted to discuss his legacy." Aunt Margaret nodded solemnly. "Your mother has been handling all the estate paperwork. She spent countless hours organizing everything according to your grandfather's wishes." I looked around the room at my family, people who had known me since birth, and realized they all believed Mom's version of events. They thought I was the ungrateful granddaughter who had abandoned an old man in his time of need. But something felt wrong. Grandpa had never spoken to me with disappointment. Even during our last phone conversation 2 days before his stroke, he had asked about my law school applications and told me how proud he was of my determination. "Can I see the will?" I asked. Mom gathered the papers protectively. The legal documents are quite complex. I have been working with our family attorney to ensure everything is processed correctly. I am studying law, Mom. I think I can handle reading a will. Her smile became tight. Of course, dear. I will make sure you get a copy once everything is finalized through probate. That night, I could not sleep. I kept replaying the meeting, analyzing every word, every gesture. Something about Mom's story did not add up. I grabbed my laptop and started researching estate law, diving deep into probate procedures and inheritance disputes. What I found made my blood run cold. In our state, wills had to be filed with the probate court within 30 days of death. If Mom was still finalizing things 3 months later, either she was lying about the timeline or something was seriously wrong with the legal process. The next morning, I drove straight to the courthouse. The clerk at the probate office was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who looked up Grandpa's case without any trouble. "Here we are," she said, pulling up the file on her computer screen. "The will was filed on time, but it looks like there is a dispute. The family attorney requested a delay in distribution pending resolution of conflicting documents." My heart started racing. Conflicting documents. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "Between you and me, honey, cases like this usually involve questions about the validity of the will. Sometimes families discover multiple versions, or there are concerns about the deceased's mental capacity when the documents were signed." I thanked her and rushed to my car, mind spinning with possibilities. If there were multiple versions of Grandpa's will, which one was Mom using, and why had not she mentioned anything about a legal dispute? That afternoon, I called Grandpa's longtime attorney, Mr. Harrison, who had handled his legal affairs for over 20 years. His secretary told me he was in court but could see me the following day. I spent the evening researching everything I could find about inheritance fraud and elder abuse. The stories I read made me sick to my stomach. Children manipulating elderly parents into changing wills, families torn apart by greed and deception, documents forged or destroyed to hide the truth. By the time I walked into Mr. Harrison's office the next day, I was prepared for the worst, but hoping for the best. "Madison," he said, standing to shake my hand. "I have been expecting someone from the family to contact me. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss." The gravity in his voice confirmed my worst fears. Whatever Mom had told us about Grandpa's will was not the whole truth. Mr. Harrison's office smelled like old leather and coffee, the walls lined with law books that seemed to hold decades of family secrets. He settled behind his massive oak desk and opened a file that was thicker than I had expected. "Madison, before we begin, I need to ask you something important," he said, his weathered hands folding over the documents. "Has your family discussed your grandfather's estate with you?" I told him about the meeting at Mom's house, about being excluded from the inheritance, about the supposed scholarship fund, and my alleged abandonment of family values. With each detail I shared, Mr. Harrison's frown deepened. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. "I am afraid your mother has not been entirely truthful with the family." My hands trembled as I gripped the arms of my chair. "What do you mean?" He pulled out a bound document and placed it in front of me. "This is your grandfather's will, dated 6 months before his death. He came to my office specifically to make changes after his cancer diagnosis." I stared at the cover page, seeing Grandpa's familiar signature at the bottom. "What kind of changes?" "He was very concerned about your mother's financial situation and her gambling problem." The words hit me like ice water. Gambling problem. Mr. Harrison's expression was grim. "Your grandfather discovered that your mother had been taking money from his accounts for over 2 years. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. She convinced him she needed help with medical bills for your father's treatments." My mind reeled. Dad had died from cancer 3 years ago, but his insurance had covered most of the expenses. Mom had never mentioned any financial struggles. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know. "Nearly $80,000 over 24 months. Your grandfather only discovered the extent of it when his bank called about unusual account activity." I felt sick. "So he cut her out of the will." Not entirely, but he made significant changes to protect the rest of the family. Mr. Harrison flipped through the pages. The bulk of his estate, including the family farm and his investment accounts, goes to you. Your mother receives the house and $50,000 contingent upon her seeking treatment for gambling addiction. My vision blurred as I tried to process this information. But she told everyone that I was cut out, that Grandpa was disappointed in me. Quite the opposite. He spoke about you constantly during our meetings. He was incredibly proud of your decision to pursue law school and wanted to ensure you had the financial support to achieve your dreams. Mr. Harrison pulled out another document, this one newer, and bearing a different law firm's letterhead. This is where things get complicated. 2 weeks ago, your mother presented this will to the probate court. I read the document title and my blood ran cold. Last Will and Testament of Harold Mitchell, dated 1 week before his death. This version leaves everything to your mother, with small amounts going to other family members. According to this document, you receive only $5,000 and the antique china set. I looked up from the papers, struggling to understand. How is that possible? You just showed me his real will. That is exactly what I am trying to determine. This newer will was prepared by a different attorney, someone I have never heard of in 30 years of practice in this county. The signature looks authentic, but several elements raise red flags. He pointed to specific sections of the document. The language is inconsistent with how your grandfather typically expressed himself in legal documents. More importantly, he was in intensive care during the week this will was supposedly signed. I have his medical records showing he was sedated and on a ventilator. The full horror of what Mom had done began to sink in. She forged his signature. I cannot make that accusation without proof, but I have serious concerns about this document's authenticity. That is why I requested the probate delay. I stared at both wills side by side, seeing my entire family situation in a completely different light. Mr. Harrison, can I ask you something? Did my grandfather ever express any disappointment about my involvement with the family? His face softened. Madison, in all our conversations, your grandfather only spoke of you with pride and admiration. He worried that you worked too hard, that you did not take enough time for yourself. But disappointed never. He considered you the most responsible and trustworthy member of your generation. Tears I had been holding back for months finally spilled over. All the guilt I had carried, all the doubt about whether I had been a good granddaughter, all the shame from that family meeting, it had all been built on lies. What happens now? I asked, wiping my eyes with the tissue he offered. Now we fight. I have already started the process to challenge the validity of the second will, but I need your help. Your mother has convinced the rest of the family that she is protecting your grandfather's true wishes. If we are going to expose the truth, we need evidence and allies. He handed me a thick folder. These are copies of all the relevant documents, including bank records, showing the unauthorized withdrawals, and medical records, proving your grandfather's condition during the supposed signing of the fake will. Study them carefully. I clutched the folder like a lifeline. What about my family? They all believe Mom's story. That is the hardest part of situations like this. People want to believe the best about their loved ones. Your mother has positioned herself as the grieving daughter carrying out her father's wishes. Challenging that narrative will require careful strategy. As I stood to leave, Mr. Harrison caught my arm gently. Madison, your grandfather made me promise something before he died. He made me swear that I would not let anyone steal your future. He believed in you completely, and now it is time for you to believe in yourself. Walking to my car, I felt like I was carrying dynamite in that folder. The evidence of Mom's betrayal was overwhelming, but I knew exposing it would tear our family apart. Some people would take her side no matter what proof I presented. Others might feel forced to choose between loyalty and truth. But as I thought about Grandpa's faith in me, about the dreams he had wanted to support, about the justice he deserved, I knew what I had to do. The war for truth was about to begin, and I was going to make sure Mom's lies did not win. That night, I spread Mr. Harrison's documents across my kitchen table like a detective working a murder case. Bank statements, medical records, handwriting samples, and legal filings created a paper trail that told a story of systematic deception. But I knew that evidence alone would not be enough. I needed allies, and I had to be strategic about how I approached each family member. My first target was my brother Jake. We had always been close despite our 5-year age gap, and I knew he had felt uncomfortable during that family meeting. I invited him for dinner at my apartment, claiming I needed help moving some furniture. Jake, I said after we had finished eating, I need to show you something, and I need you to promise you will look at it with an open mind. He leaned back in his chair, studying my expression. This is about Grandpa's will, is not it, Madison? I know you are hurt, but maybe we should just accept what happened and move on. What if I told you that everything Mom said at that meeting was a lie? His face hardened. That is a serious accusation. Mom has been grieving too, you know. She spent more time with Grandpa in his final months than any of us. I pulled out the folder and opened it to the bank statements. Jake, look at these. Really look at them. For the next hour, I walked him through every piece of evidence. I watched his expression change from skepticism to confusion to horrified understanding. When I showed him the medical records proving Grandpa was unconscious when the second will was supposedly signed, Jake dropped his head into his hands. "Oh my God," he whispered. "She really did this. I am afraid so. And she convinced all of you that I was the problem." Jake looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Madison, I am so sorry. I should have questioned her story. Some parts never made sense to me, but I thought grief was making me paranoid." "What parts did not make sense?" "Well, Grandpa never seemed disappointed in you when I talked to him. And Mom kept changing details about her conversations with him. First, she said he was worried about your career, then it was about you not visiting enough, then it was about you being disrespectful. The story kept evolving." I felt a surge of hope. If Jake had noticed inconsistencies, other family members might have too. "There is something else," Jake continued, looking uncomfortable. "About 6 months ago, Mom asked to borrow money from me. She said she had some unexpected expenses but would pay me back quickly. When I asked for details, she got defensive and told me to forget she had asked." This was new information. "How much money?" $5,000. I gave it to her because she seemed desperate, but she never paid me back or mentioned it again." I added this to my mental list of evidence. Mom's financial problems went deeper than just stealing from Grandpa. "Jake, I need your help, but I understand if you cannot get involved. This is going to get ugly." He straightened up and I saw some of our father's determination in his expression. "What do we need to do?" My next approach was more delicate. I needed to talk to Uncle Robert, Dad's brother, who had always been the family peacekeeper. But Robert was also fiercely loyal to Mom, partly because he felt protective of her after Dad's death. I met him for coffee at his favorite diner, a place where he had taken me for pancakes when I was little. We made small talk for a while before I carefully broached the subject. "Uncle Robert, can I ask you something about Grandpa's final months? You visited him regularly at the nursing home, right?" He nodded, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Every Tuesday and Thursday. Sometimes your mother was there, sometimes not. Why? Did Grandpa ever mention being disappointed in me?" Robert's eyebrows rose. "Disappointed, honey, that man bragged about you to anyone who would listen. He showed pictures of you to the nurses and talked about how proud he was that you were going to be a lawyer." My heart clenched. Even near the end. Especially near the end. After his stroke, when he could barely speak, he would still light up when I mentioned your name. Robert leaned forward, concerned. "Madison, why are you asking these questions?" I took a deep breath and told him everything. I showed him the documents, explained about the forged will, revealed the extent of Mom's theft. Robert listened in complete silence, his coffee growing cold as I laid out the evidence. When I finished, he sat back heavily in the booth. "I knew something was wrong. Your mother had been acting strangely for months before your grandfather died. Secretive, defensive, always changing the subject when we talked about his condition. You noticed it too." "More than noticed. I was worried about her mental health. She seemed paranoid, sometimes claiming that people were trying to take advantage of your grandfather. Now I understand she was projecting her own behavior onto others. Robert pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. Madison, I think you need to see this. He showed me a text thread between him and Mom from 2 months before Grandpa's death. In the messages, Mom was asking Robert to support her if there were any legal challenges to Grandpa's estate. She claimed that some family members might try to manipulate an old man for financial gain. She was laying groundwork, I realized, setting up the narrative that someone might challenge the will, so when I eventually questioned things, you would all remember these conversations and assume I was being greedy. Robert deleted the messages and put his phone away. What kind of person does something like this to their own family? Someone desperate enough to steal from their dying father. By the end of the week, I had quietly approached 3 more family members. Aunt Margaret had also noticed Mom's inconsistent stories and her sudden defensiveness about money. Cousin Rachel revealed that Mom had asked to borrow money from her too, with the same vague explanation about unexpected expenses. But not everyone was receptive to the truth. Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, refused to even look at the evidence. She accused me of being jealous and vindictive, of trying to destroy Mom's reputation out of spite. When I tried to explain about the forged signature, she hung up on me. Cousin David took Mom's side as well, arguing that even if she had made mistakes, families should stick together. Your mother lost her husband and her father within 2 years, he said. Maybe she was not thinking clearly, but that does not make her a criminal. The family was splitting into camps exactly as I had feared. But I had enough allies to move forward with the legal challenge. Mr. Harrison filed a formal complaint alleging document fraud, and the probate court ordered a handwriting analysis of both wills. Mom's response was swift and vicious. She called a second family meeting this time, positioning herself as the victim of my vindictive lies. She claimed I was trying to steal money that rightfully belonged to the family scholarship fund. She produced tearful testimony about Grandpa's supposed disappointment in me, complete with fabricated quotes about my selfishness and disrespect. But this time I was ready for her. I walked into that meeting with my folder of evidence and my newly assembled team of allies. Jake sat beside me, Uncle Robert flanked my other side, and Aunt Margaret had positioned herself where she could see everyone's reactions. Before we discuss the scholarship fund, I said, interrupting Mom's prepared speech, I think everyone should see what Grandpa's real will actually says. I placed copies of the authentic will in front of each family member and watched their faces as they read the truth. The room erupted in chaos, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was winning. The chaos in Mom's living room was deafening. Voices overlapped as family members argued, shouted, and demanded explanations. Some people were reading the authentic will with shocked expressions, while others defended Mom with increasing desperation. "This is impossible," Aunt Linda declared, waving the document in the air. "These papers could be fake just as easily as the ones you are accusing Rebecca of forging." Uncle Robert stood up, his voice cutting through the noise. "Linda, look at the dates. Look at the medical records. Harold was unconscious when that second will was supposedly signed." "Medical records can be altered too," Cousin David interjected. "Madison works in a law office. She would know how to manipulate documents." I felt like I was drowning in accusations and counter-accusations. Even with my evidence and my allies, Mom was managing to create enough doubt to muddy the waters. Her strategy was becoming clear. If she could not prove her innocence, she would destroy my credibility instead. Then Jake spoke up, his voice steady and calm. "I believe Madison and I think we need to let the courts decide what really happened here." For a moment, the room fell silent. My brother's support meant everything to me, and I could see it was having an impact on the undecided family members. But then something happened that I never saw coming. Aunt Margaret, who had been one of my strongest allies, cleared her throat nervously. "Actually, I think we need to be very careful about how we proceed with this situation." I turned to look at her, confused by the sudden shift in her tone. "What do you mean, Aunt Margaret?" She avoided my eyes, focusing instead on the papers in front of her. Well, even if there are irregularities with the will, we should consider what is best for the family as a whole. Sometimes it is better to let sleeping dogs lie. My stomach dropped. Aunt Margaret, you saw the evidence. You agreed that something was not right. I know, dear, but I have been thinking about this more carefully. Your mother has been through so much loss, and dragging this through the courts will only create more pain for everyone. Uncle Robert stared at his wife in disbelief. Margaret, what are you talking about? We are talking about fraud here, potentially criminal behavior. But I could see something else happening behind Aunt Margaret's eyes, something that looked like fear or guilt. Perhaps, she continued, her voice growing stronger, we should focus on honoring your grandfather's memory rather than fighting over money. Madison is young and capable. She does not need an inheritance to succeed in life. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Margaret had been helping me build my case for weeks, encouraging me to fight for the truth, and now she was abandoning me in front of the entire family. Mom seized on this defection immediately. Margaret is absolutely right. This family has suffered enough loss without tearing ourselves apart over money. Madison, I understand you are disappointed, but sometimes we have to accept that life does not always go the way we planned. I watched in horror as the momentum shifted against me. Margaret's betrayal had given the fence-sitters permission to side with Mom, choosing family peace over justice. I cannot believe this, Jake muttered beside me. Margaret, you were the one who told Madison to keep digging for the truth. I changed my mind, Margaret replied stiffly. Sometimes the truth causes more harm than good. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations as family members processed this new development. I gathered my papers with shaking hands, feeling like I had lost a battle I thought I was winning. As people began to leave, I overheard Mom talking quietly to Margaret near the front door. Thank you for being reasonable about this situation. I know it was not easy. Margaret's response chilled me to the bone. We all have things we would rather keep private. Some secrets are worth protecting. That night I called Mr. Harrison in a panic. She got to Margaret somehow. I do not know what Mom has on her, but she completely flipped sides during the meeting. Madison, this is unfortunately common in family disputes. People who seem supportive can turn when the pressure gets intense. But do not lose hope. We still have solid legal grounds for our challenge. What if the family pressure gets to Jake or Uncle Robert too? What if they all abandon me? Then you fight alone if you have to, but I do not think it will come to that. Your brother seems genuinely committed to the truth. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment feeling more isolated than ever. I had started this fight with righteous anger and clear evidence, but Mom was proving to be a more formidable opponent than I had anticipated. She understood family psychology better than I did, knew exactly which pressure points to apply to turn people against me. The next few days brought more bad news. Cousin Rachel started avoiding my calls, claiming she needed to stay out of family drama. Uncle Robert remained supportive, but seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the conflict. Even Jake began expressing doubts about whether the legal battle was worth destroying family relationships. Maybe we should just take whatever settlement Mom offers and move on, he suggested during a tense phone conversation. This is tearing everyone apart. Jake, she stole from Grandpa and lied to all of us. How can we just let that go? Because maybe Margaret was right. Maybe some battles are not worth fighting. I realized that Mom was not just fighting me in the courtroom, she was waging psychological warfare against my entire support system. Every conversation, every family gathering, every interaction was an opportunity for her to plant seeds of doubt about my motives and my character. The low point came when I received a text from Margaret. Madison, I think you should know that some family members are concerned about your mental state. This obsession with the will is not healthy. Please consider getting counseling. The message was clearly orchestrated by Mom, designed to make me question my own sanity. Was I really fighting for justice, or was I just a bitter granddaughter who could not accept disappointment? Had grief warped my judgment? For one dark moment, sitting alone in my kitchen at midnight, I almost believed them. But then I looked at Grandpa's picture on my refrigerator, remembering his pride in my determination, his belief in my future, his gentle encouragement to always stand up for what was right. Mom had won this battle, turning my allies against me and isolating me from family support. But the war was far from over. I just needed to find a new strategy and maybe some new allies who could not be intimidated or bought off. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I woke up that morning with a clarity that surprised me. While Mom had successfully turned most of my family against me, she had also revealed something crucial. She was desperate enough to manipulate people who had initially supported me. That level of desperation suggested she had more to hide than just the forged will. My first stop was the nursing home where Grandpa had spent his final months. Sunset Manor was a cheerful place with friendly staff, but I was not there for a social visit. I needed to talk to someone who had witnessed Mom's behavior during Grandpa's final weeks. I found Maria, the head nurse who had cared for Grandpa, preparing medications in the nursing station. She remembered me immediately and offered condolences before asking how she could help. "Maria, I need to ask you about my mother's visits with my grandfather. Do you remember anything unusual about her behavior in the weeks before he died?" Maria glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then motioned for me to follow her to a private office. "Honey, I was wondering if anyone from your family would ever ask about that." My heart started racing. "What do you mean?" "Your mother's behavior changed dramatically in your grandfather's final month. She went from visiting twice a week to being here almost every day. She would arrive early and stay late, and she seemed very anxious whenever other family members showed up." Maria pulled out a logbook and flipped through the pages. "Look here. These are the visitor records for your grandfather's final 6 weeks. Your mother signed in 38 times during that period." I studied the records, seeing Mom's signature over and over again. "Did she ever bring any paperwork or ask him to sign anything?" "That is the strange part. About 2 weeks before he passed, she brought what looked like legal documents. She said it was insurance paperwork that needed his signature for benefits, but your grandfather was heavily sedated that day because of pain management." My pulse quickened. "Did you see him sign anything?" "No, and that bothered me. When someone is that sedated, they cannot legally sign documents. I mentioned it to the floor supervisor, but your mother said his doctor had approved it." Maria pulled out another file. "I kept notes about unusual incidents just in case there were ever questions later. Your mother also asked several times about your grandfather's mental capacity documentation. She wanted copies of his cognitive assessment reports. This was exactly the kind of evidence I needed." "Maria, would you be willing to testify about what you witnessed?" She hesitated. "I like your family, Madison, but if something illegal happened, I have a professional obligation to report it." I left the nursing home with Maria's contact information and a promise that she would speak to Mr. Harrison about her observations. For the first time in days, I felt hopeful again. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. That afternoon, I received a call from someone I had never met, Patricia Walsh, a paralegal at the law firm that had supposedly prepared the fake will. "Miss Mitchell, I saw your name in some legal filings related to your grandfather's estate. I think we need to talk." We met at a coffee shop downtown where Patricia revealed information that changed everything. "The attorney listed on that second will, David Goldman, does not exist," she began. "I have worked in legal services in this county for 15 years, and I have never heard of him. More importantly, the law firm letterhead on those documents is fake." She pulled out photocopies of the forged will alongside legitimate documents from various law firms. "Look at the formatting, the typography, the official seals. Someone created this letterhead specifically to make these documents look legitimate." My mind was racing. "How did you discover this?" "Because your mother contacted our firm 3 months ago asking about will preparation services. She met with my boss and asked very specific questions about how wills are authenticated, what kind of documentation is required, and how probate courts verify signatures." Patricia handed me a file folder. She even asked about the penalties for will forgery, claiming she was worried about protecting her father from scammers who might try to manipulate him. The irony was staggering. Mom had researched how to forge a will while pretending to be concerned about protecting Grandpa from fraud. There is more, Patricia continued. After your grandfather died, your mother called our office again. She wanted to know if we had any record of her previous consultation. When we said yes, she offered to pay us to destroy our meeting notes. Did you? Absolutely not. We reported the contact to the State Bar Association. Attempting to destroy evidence related to potential fraud is a serious crime. Patricia's testimony would be devastating to Mom's case, but I knew she would claim this was all circumstantial evidence. I needed something more definitive. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Jake showed up at my apartment looking haggard and guilty. Madison, I need to tell you something, and you are not going to like it. I braced myself for another betrayal, but what he told me was worse than abandonment. Mom asked me to lie for her. She wanted me to testify that Grandpa had expressed disappointment about you during one of our visits. She even coached me on what to say and when to say it. I sank into my chair, overwhelmed by the extent of Mom's manipulation. What did you tell her? I told her I would think about it, but Madison, I cannot do it. I cannot lie under oath to destroy my own sister. Jake sat down across from me, looking more serious than I had ever seen him. There is something else. I think I know why Margaret flipped sides. He pulled out his phone and showed me a bank statement. After you confronted Mom about the will, I started monitoring my accounts more carefully. Look at this transaction from 6 months ago. The statement showed a $5,000 deposit into Jake's account, followed by an immediate withdrawal of the same amount to an account labeled M. Henderson. Henderson is Margaret's maiden name, Jake explained. Mom did not just borrow money from me, she funneled it to Margaret, probably as payment for something. I studied the transaction details. Payment for what? I think Margaret helped Mom create the fake will. Margaret worked as a secretary for a law firm before she retired. She would know how to format legal documents and create convincing letterhead. The pieces were falling into place. Margaret's sudden change of heart was not about family loyalty, it was about self-preservation. She was complicit in the fraud and could not afford to have it exposed. Jake, are you willing to testify about this? He nodded firmly. I should have come forward sooner. I was trying to protect the family, but what Mom did is unforgivable. That night, I called Mr. Harrison with updates about Maria's testimony, Patricia's evidence, and Jake's revelation about Margaret's involvement. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we were building an unshakable case. Madison, with this evidence, we can not only challenge the fake will, but potentially pursue criminal charges for fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy, Mr. Harrison said. Your mother's house of lies is about to collapse. The next morning, I woke up ready for the final battle. Mom had underestimated my determination and overestimated her ability to control the narrative. It was time to show her what happened when you stole from a family and lied to cover it up. The truth was about to set everyone free, whether they wanted it or not. The courtroom was packed with family members, nursing home staff, and legal professionals when the hearing began. Mom sat at the defendant's table with her attorney, maintaining the composure she had perfected over months of deception. But I could see cracks in her facade. The way her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking, the forced smile that never reached her eyes. Mr. Harrison presented our evidence methodically, building a case so comprehensive that even Mom's lawyer seemed uncomfortable. Maria testified about Mom's suspicious behavior at the nursing home, describing how she had pressured a sedated man to sign documents. Patricia Walsh detailed Mom's research into will forgery and her attempt to destroy evidence. Jake's testimony about the money laundering to Margaret hit like a bombshell. But the most devastating moment came when the handwriting expert took the stand. The signature on the second will shows clear signs of forgery, Dr. Rebecca Thornton explained, projecting enlarged images of both documents onto a screen. The pen pressure is inconsistent, the letter formation shows hesitation marks, and the overall flow lacks the natural rhythm of authentic signatures. She pointed to specific details that were invisible to the untrained eye. Moreover, medical records indicate that Mr. Mitchell was physically incapable of producing any signature during the time frame this document was allegedly signed. Mom's attorney tried to argue that the medical records could be mistaken, that perhaps Grandpa had a lucid moment, but Dr. Thornton's testimony was unshakable. When it was Mom's turn to testify, the lies began unraveling immediately. She contradicted herself multiple times, could not explain her extensive research into will forgery, and became visibly angry when pressed about the stolen money. "I was trying to protect my father from being taken advantage of," she insisted, her voice rising. "Madison was pressuring him to change his will in her favor." "Mrs. Morrison," Mr. Harrison replied calmly, "can you explain why there is no record of Madison visiting your father during the time period when this alleged pressure occurred?" Mom faltered, realizing she had been caught in another lie. The nursing home visitor logs showed I had been following COVID protocols and staying away during Grandpa's most vulnerable period. The judge's verdict was swift and decisive. The second will was declared fraudulent, Mom was ordered to pay restitution for the stolen money, and criminal charges were referred to the district attorney's office. But the legal victory was only the beginning of a much deeper transformation. Outside the courthouse, family members who had sided with Mom faced the uncomfortable truth about their choices. Aunt Linda approached me with tears in her eyes, struggling to apologize for not listening when I tried to show her the evidence. "I wanted to believe Rebecca was protecting the family," she said. "I could not imagine that she would steal from her own father." Cousin David, who had accused me of being vindictive, stood awkwardly nearby, clearly wanting to apologize, but not knowing how to begin. I decided to make it easier for him. "David, I understand why you supported her. Mom is very convincing and family loyalty is important, but sometimes loyalty means holding people accountable for their actions." The most difficult confrontation was with Aunt Margaret, who had been arrested as an accomplice after Jake's testimony about the money laundering. She was released on bail pending trial, and the family was struggling to process the extent of her involvement. "I never meant for it to go this far," she told me when we met at Uncle Robert's house a week after the hearing. "Rebecca said she just needed help formatting some documents. She claimed Harold had asked her to update his will, but the original attorney was unavailable." Uncle Robert sat beside his wife, looking like he had aged 10 years in the past month. "Margaret, how could you not realize what you were doing?" "Because I trusted Rebecca," she replied, breaking down completely. "She was family, she was grieving. I thought I was helping someone organize legal paperwork, not committing fraud." Watching Margaret's genuine remorse, I realized that Mom's manipulation had extended far beyond simple lies. She had exploited people's natural desire to help family members, turning their compassion into complicity. The criminal proceedings took several months, during which our family underwent a painful but necessary healing process. Mom was ultimately sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay full restitution plus damages. Margaret received probation and community service in exchange for her cooperation with investigators. But the most significant changes were not legal consequences. They were personal revelations about what family really means. Jake and I grew closer than we had ever been, bonded by our shared commitment to truth, even when it was difficult. Uncle Robert, freed from Margaret's influence, became a strong advocate for family transparency and accountability. Even some of the relatives who had initially opposed me began reaching out, wanting to rebuild relationships based on honesty rather than comfortable lies. The money from Grandpa's inheritance allowed me to attend law school without debt, exactly as he had intended. But more importantly, it came with the knowledge that I had fought for something bigger than financial gain. I had fought for integrity and justice. During my first semester at law school, I received a letter from Mom in prison. She apologized for the pain she had caused and admitted that gambling addiction had driven her to desperate actions. She asked for forgiveness and expressed hope that we could rebuild our relationship someday. I wrote back, not offering immediate forgiveness, but expressing hope for her rehabilitation and eventual reconciliation. Some bridges once burned take years to rebuild. But I believed in the possibility of redemption, just as Grandpa had believed in the importance of second chances. The experience taught me that family is not just about blood relationships. It is about the people who stand by you when the truth is hard to hear and harder to accept. Jake, Uncle Robert, and even new friends like Patricia Walsh had become my chosen family bound together by shared values rather than genetic connections. 1 year after the courthouse victory, I organized a memorial service for Grandpa at the family farm, which was now legally mine. Family members who had supported me came together to honor his memory and celebrate the values he had tried to instill in all of us: honesty, hard work, and the courage to do what is right, even when it is difficult. Standing in the farmhouse where Grandpa had raised his children and welcomed his grandchildren, I felt his presence and his approval. The legacy he had left was not just financial. It was moral courage and the understanding that justice sometimes requires personal sacrifice. As I finish telling you this story today, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what you know is right? How do you handle situations where the people you love are asking you to ignore the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I know many of you have faced similar impossible choices. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more real-life family drama and justice stories. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that standing up for the truth is always worth it, even when the cost feels unbearable. Thank you for listening to my family's journey from betrayal to justice. Remember that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones worth fighting, and chosen family can be just as powerful as the family you are born into. Until next time, keep fighting for what is right and never let anyone convince you to stay silent about the truth.